Voices, everybody. And action.
It's time once again for the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1995 release starring Richard Dreyfuss, Mr. Holland's Opus. With me are Ken.
It's almost funny. I got dragged into this gig kicking and screaming, and now that's the only thing I want to do.
Are you talking about the podcast?
Yeah.
Of course. And Ted.
Sooner or later, these kids aren't going to have anything to read or write about.
Typical 2024. And hey, everybody, I'm Eric. Just remember, play the sunset. Everything will be great. We are talking Mr. Holland's Opus. Ted, tell us about the particulars of this movie.
Okay, Mr. Holland's Opus is directed by Stephen Herrick. It's a screenplay by Patrick Shane Duncan. It has a running time of 143 minutes. It was released December 29th, 1995. It had a budget of $31 million and a box office gross of $106.3 million. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score, a critic score of 75%, an audience score of 84%, and its IMDb rating is 7.3. Mr. Holland's Opus stars Richard Dreyfuss as Glenn Holland, Glenn Headley as Iris Holland, Jay Thomas as Bill Meister, Olympia Dukakis as Principal Helen Jacobs, William H. Macy as Vice Principal Gene Walters, Jean Louisa Kelly as Rowena Morgan, Joanna Gleason as Gertrude Lang, and Alicia Witt as also the younger Gertrude Lang, Terrence Howard as Lewis Russ, and Anthony Natale as Coltrane Cole Holland at age 28, Joseph Anderson as Cole Holland at age 15, and Nicholas John Renner as Cole at age 6.
You got some pretty young actors and actresses there in their early part of their career.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Terrence Howard, William H. Macy, not bad, huh?
Yeah.
What about 6 Month Cole? I want to know who.
Yeah,
who
no,
plays
I don't
6
know.
Month Cole.
You'll have
6 month
to
Cole?
ask.
Yeah, right. What about Out of the Womb Cole? How about him?
Yeah.
6 hour Cole. Yeah. Well, that would be a fun fact, Ken, if you knew that answer. But tell us some more fun facts about this movie.
Okay, so the movie was filmed in Portland, Oregon.
That's not fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun, right? John F. Kennedy High School is Grant High School in real life. Glenn Holland enthusiastically uses rock and pop music in class, saying he loves it, and is also a fan of jazz. But Richard Dreyfuss, when he appeared inside the Actors Studios, which is a great show, if you haven't checked that out, check that out. He revealed that he has always hated rock and roll. One sound that he hates the most is the electric guitar.
Well, that's
Richard
Dreyfuss, a fun fact.
Yeah, Richard Dreyfuss is kind of a get off my lawn type of a guy.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah, he's kind of like Principal from the Back in the Future.
Yeah,
Back to the Future 2. He's like got the shotgun and you're on his lawn.
Yeah, he's a crotchety old man now.
Every person in this film that portrayed a deaf person is also deaf in real life.
Cool.
Inspired by the motion picture, its composer, Michael Kamen, founded the Mr. Holland's Opus Foundation in 1996, which is committed to the future of music education. I like it when a movie inspires something that benefits others. I think that's nice to see. So, writer Patrick Duncan was nominated for a Golden Globe Award for Best Screenplay at the 53rd Golden Globe Awards, and Dreyfuss was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor at the Academy Awards and also for the Golden Globe Awards as well.
Didn't win.
Didn't win, but was nominated.
It's just an honor to be nominated.
That's some fun, interesting facts about Mr. Holland's Opus.
All right. Well, let's talk about the first time we watched this movie. For me, it was last week. I've never seen this movie before in my life. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse, so I watched it a couple times. I'm sure you guys have seen it, of course. Ted?
Yeah, I don't know exactly when I saw this movie for the first time, but it's been one of those movies that I remember watching with my family So I probably wasn't at the theater.
Ken, cable, I assume?
Yes.
Shocking.
Definitely cable pay movie channel probably sometime in 96, 97, somewhere in that area.
Okay. Well, why don't we kick off the movie here? We'll talk about the beginning. So I will lead us off in the fall of 1964. 30-year-old Glenn Holland. He's a successful and talented musician and composer from Portland, Oregon.
Is he successful, though? It says
No,
that
he's successful in his own mind, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
We really don't know if he's talented because I never hear him play an instrument, by the way.
He plays the piano.
I guess he does play a little bit.
I think he's a talented musician because he can adapt to different genres of music with the rock and the jazz. No, I think he's talented. You're right. We should say talented musician and
mediocre.
Well, no, hold on. Talented musician and composer. It's not talented musician and talented composer. So that's accurate. He does compose his own music. He is writing it. So I'll allow it. Let's go with that.
I wish they would have told us a little bit more about what he did before he was a teacher. I know he was in a band, but was his band good? Was this band
No, they were doing
successful?
like weddings and bar mitzvahs.
That's what it sounded like, at least.
Yeah, that's literally, he said that. They were doing weddings, bar mitzvahs, just events. It was just like a little house band. And back in the 60s, you didn't have DJs. You had wedding bands. You had all that stuff.
Singer?
So
Yeah, Adam Sandler.
Yeah, we had Adam Sandler, a wedding singer. That's right. So Mr. Holland switches gears, taking a position as a music teacher because he got a degree or a certificate to fall back on there at John F. Kennedy High School, the newly named John F. Kennedy High School after the assassination of JFK the year earlier, so that he can afford the rent with his young wife Iris and work on his symphony. So obviously the band wasn't paying the bills, which makes perfect sense. Holland quickly learns that he hates his job, welcome to the real world, because his students generally don't relate to music the way he does. Generally, students don't relate to anything, just like every high school kid.
So it sounds like he just got married. And
he did. He's recently married. Yeah.
So he probably met her at an event that he was playing at. That would have been kind of cool to probably find out that was the case. And then, he realized, I fell in love here. I need to get a job. And so he has to quit the band.
I like the beginning setup of this movie as he's just talking about getting up like at the crack ass of dawn. He's like, why do people get up so early? What, And if I remember right, he had to be up at like 6:30 and be at school by 7:30 or something, like an hour between. Yeah. How do you pull that off? How do you wake up, get a shower?
She was trying to wake up and try to have sex with him because they were trying to have a baby or something. Gotta get up. And she's like kissing him and all over him.
He's got a new job.
Sex or something. But
no, he's got a new job, man. He's got a obviously if you're in a band, you're not playing early stuff. You're playing later night stuff. Right. So you're sleeping in. Now he's got a real world job where he's got to get up early to be at school, a teacher. That's a huge change.
I think it would have been cool if he was worth the band that night, the night before.
I would have liked to seen like a prior scene with him in like a flashback to him working the band, seeing what instrument he played, what kind of music they played, that kind of thing, and then flashbacking to him like the alarm going off at 6:30, and he's like, yeah.
It is what it is at the start of the movie. It's a typical beginning of the movie where
it sets the scene.
He's been given a task that he's not truly involved with, and I mean, based off of the title of the movie, we know. So it does come off as kind of cliche. He doesn't like his job, and he doesn't relate to the students. It's a typical teacher start to a teacher movie. I mean, it's been done numerous times. Dangerous Minds comes to mind as
the movie Teachers with Nick Nolte comes to mind.
Yeah, Teachers. Yeah. I mean, so it does come off as very cliche. But I think that Olympia Dukakis and William H. Macy and Richard Dreyfuss elevate the cliche to a higher level. I think it adds a little bit more gravitas to.
Well, because Macy takes his job so seriously. He is like,
right. He's
got
perfect
the buzz
for this.
cut. He's by the book,
right?
With the girls with their skirts getting on their knees, which I thought was a little awkward, but okay.
Right.
And measuring the length. he is by the book, and Dukakis, I don't know. She knows she's going to be retiring soon. She's just like, yeah. But even she's a little rigid and stuff too.
A little bit.
I think she's trying to groom him into a teacher.
Yeah, I think she sees potential in him. And, and William H. Macy really fits his character.
Oh, so good.
He and Steve Buscemi are, like, interchangeable as far as how they can, like, chameleon themselves into whatever role that they have. I mean, he talks about Ralph Nader and the Corvair.
Oh, yeah, the Corvair. He's like, oh, you're driving that thing? Yeah, I mean, that was kind of funny. I did like that scene.
I love William H. Macy.
Yes.
I have everything from Fargo to The Cooler. I mean...
Love The Cooler.
Yeah,
Cooler's great.
He's awesome. That's why I say, because like, I hold him in such high esteem.
He's awesome, but I disagree with Buffy here. I think this role...
That's because you're an idiot.
...could be done by anybody.
I don't know.
Wait. What role?
William H. Macy's role.
The vice principal.
No.
It's very blah. It's very blah.
But that's the whole point of it.
But that's what I'm saying. Anybody could have done it. He doesn't have a wide range of emotions. He set one way, and that's the only way you did it. You can get any actor. Well, not any actor, but you get a lot of different actors to do that.
Is that a criticism of the...
I'm not against the actor. I'm a big Macy fan, so I know he can act his way out of a paper bag. I'm just saying the way this role is written, anybody can do it.
No, he's consistently the same person throughout the entire movie.
Which bothers me, because I think that's a writing problem. I think he should have adapted. I mean, he has the freaking same look in 1995 that he does in 1965.
That's the whole point. The same look even going into 1972 when the principal retires and he takes over. He doesn't change his look because he doesn't adapt with the times. That's the whole point of it.
Sure,
he is rigid. That's the whole point of it. Doesn't change the suits, doesn't change his hair. He's the same guy.
He doesn't have the respect for the arts either.
Correct.
But he's not an age person. In 30 years. They don't even try to age.
Well,
exactly.
It's only
same. Well, that's tough. I mean, let's be perfectly honest. Richard Dreyfuss stays the same age throughout the whole movie too.
They do a great job of
by putting a mustache
Dreyfuss
on him. Really, I don't know.
I mean, by the time that they get to the end of the movie, he's sitting on top. He looks like what Richard Dreyfuss would look like in his 60s. At this time, I think Richard Dreyfuss was probably around 50 when he probably made this movie. I think if you're going to do this movie, getting somebody who's 50 that's going to try to play 35, early 30s to early 60s, I think getting somebody right in the age around 45 to 50 is like a perfect age group
because
for this.
You can dye the hair and then you make it gray towards the end. Give them a little bit
more wrinkles and add the glasses and make the glasses. I mean, I thought they did a really nice job of that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I actually, my favorite scene with William H. Macy is at the beginning where they are talking about the car. That's when I like him the most. That's when I can relate to him because at least he's talking about something that's different from school. Because the rest of the way it's all about he's the enemy. I would like to know why he feels that the arcs need to be cut.
I think a lot of it on that situation is because he has an animosity towards Mr. Holland. Also, during that time, that was the start of when school programs started to be cut. And the arts is the easiest one to cut. They're not going to cut sports, obviously, we know that. Playing by the principal school book of what would be cut first in that era and continue into the 1980s. So the way he presented it to Mr. Holland was interesting, I thought. And Mr. Holland's, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but again, his demeanor remains the same throughout.
I like Dreyfuss's character here. I know I'm all about backstory. I like a little bit more backstory and to get us to develop. But as Ted stated earlier, these actors kind of take a cliche beginning here and kind of overcome it, especially Richard Dreyfuss. Does a great job here of portraying somebody who doesn't want to go to work. He's in the middle of...
He wants to be a composer.
He wants to do what's right, though, by his wife, because he loves his wife. And so he does have to take the job. I think it's funny that they make fun of him when he thinks that he did this because he wanted to have more time to compose.
Right. Eh.
Now that I thought that should have been an in joke throughout the whole movie.
Like how's the composing going? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Some problems with this movie are the fact that there's a lot they can had here. I think they gloss over a lot throughout this whole movie. One thing I do like is the start of the relationship with the principal. I would have loved to have seen her interviewing him to find out why she chose him, because she knew he had no experience. But then when they get together and, he's lost in the high school and it almost seems like he doesn't even know who she is.
She didn't. He completely forgot her.
I would have loved to have seen the interview, see why she took a chance on him.
I actually like the fact that he doesn't recognize her. He has no appreciation for this. He doesn't.
For being a teacher at all.
Right.
None.
Oh, I like it
So
too.
he wouldn't necessarily remember. Is this because he's blocked it out of his mind because he doesn't want to do the job?
I think you're right by that. But I also, at the same time, I would like to have seen, was there some answer during that question? I think that would have led a little bit more depth to this movie and would me appreciate. I guess this is like a fish out of water type of situation where he's doing something.
Yeah, that's how they want to try to start it off. Yeah,
and I kind of think they're just kind of there. It could have been much better.
Yeah, the writing here is not War and Peace. We'll put it that way. I mean, there's a lot of cliches, and that's gonna be the code word for the day. I mean, they hit every single teaching cliche. This whole movie is one gigantic cliche because they hit every single one.
So, Mr. Holland learns how to connect with his students by using rock and roll and other popular music to convince them that music is fun and worthwhile pursuit. He also takes on tutoring Gertrude and Louis with playing their instruments. Louis is later killed in Vietnam. He becomes a popular teacher at the school and rises to the task of creating a school marching band with the help from the football coach, with whom he becomes lifelong friends. Holland persuades the principal, Alan Jacobs, to maintain funding for the school's art programs, despite a shrinking budget and the objections of Vice Principal Gene Walters, who eventually takes over as principal upon Jacobs' retirement. I like the relationship with the tutoring. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that throughout the whole movie. I liked the Gertrude one. I don't know if Louis one plays off as well here. I feel like it could have been a little bit more deeper and it made us more invested. So when Louis does die later on, it hits harder. I mean, I felt more connected to the football coach, his relationship with it, than I did with Mr. Holland in the situation.
I don't know. I thought Jay Thomas played a pretty good, I guess, Ted, I would continue to say cliche football coach in his coaching. But Jay Thomas is a funny guy. I thought he brought a little humor to the coaching position. And how he kind of bonded with Mr. Holland, too. Because let's be honest, generally those teachers, those are two different types of teachers. And I did like the scene where he cuts in line in front of the kids, kind of showing his authority. I thought he's like, dude, you're a teacher. Just do it. That was kind of cool. He was like he was actually kind of a mentor to Mr. Holland.
Sure, yeah. I think he needed somebody like that. I like it when they're in line and he wants more. He's like,
right, keep it coming, honey. Yeah.
And then Mr. Holland is just like, what is this? Cafeteria
Spam surprise or something? Yeah.
Another cliche. The school lunch is not.
Yes, good. No one likes school lunches. I get it. Yeah, it's total cliche.
I agree. I like the tutoring part. However, knowing the time frame, you kind of had this feeling that something bad was going to happen to Louis. I mean, that's one of the things that this movie really tries to straddle the line. One of the reviewers, one of the critics brought it up that they thought that they did a really good job of mixing in real life items into the movie.
Like assassination of Kennedy
and the Vietnam War, and then he tutors somebody, he brings somebody along that has no musical ability. I mean, he can't even, at the beginning, he can't even keep beat.
Right.
It's amazing. Of course, something bad happens to that particular kid.
Of course.
But that death also sets up the tutoring of another child who does have musical ability, but is a smartass and thinks that the class is below him.
And how about bringing him to the funeral, huh?
That was a little extreme.
Yeah,
But I think it's a wake-up call that the kid probably needed.
I think so. Reality check.
Right.
I almost thought it was kind of a waste of a scene, to be honest with you, because of the fact, okay, he acts out in class, so he decides to take him to the funeral instead of like having him like serve detention with the monastery or whatever.
Well, I think Mr. Holland realizes that that's not gonna reach that kid, because let's face it, Mr. Holland turns into a very good teacher.
Yes, he
And
does.
he's got very good instincts about what's going to reach the kids. Once he makes that connection between American Bandstand and Bach at the beginning, he gets this feeling for the students. He knows that if I can't think of the kid's name off the top of my head, but he knows that detention is not going to reach him. That's not going to be the thing that touches that kid in a way to make a significant change to him or enlighten him further.
Yeah, but they don't even say what happens to this kid. After the funeral scene, it's just kind of a walk-off. We don't see
he shows up. He shows up at the very end of the movie too.
Yeah, but we don't know what's happened. All we know is he's like happy to be there, and teacher's surprised that he's there.
Of the kids that he mentors, the only person we really know until the very end we only know about is Lewis, who dies in Vietnam.
Oh yeah, that's true.
I mean, another character we're going to talk about in a couple of sections, we never find out what happens to Rowena.
Right. But at least we have an end to that. Even with Gertrude, who we see later on at the end of the film, at least we see that success, that he reached her. How do we know he reached this character? For me,
very true.
I mean, we get that at the end where he sees him at the concert at the end, but we don't know how that changed him. I would love to see maybe another scene with him in class behaving or acting, because he was smart. He says, "You could test me, and I know all of this." Right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to see the results of that because he kind of just left him right there at the funeral. We're there to imagine that he reached him. So.
Yeah, his character is kind of it's a hanging participle. It just kind of, there's no end game for that particular character. And here again, that's sloppy writing.
And I think that's the problem with this movie a little bit, is that there's sloppy writing. There's so much potential, I think, with the idea of this, right? Mm-hmm. I really like how they developed Gertrude and him. I thought that was one of the better
definitely.
tutoring scenes, what made me buy him as a teacher was, working with her and her frustrations at the beginning and wanting to give up. And I love it when he does say, he's like, time to give it up. Or I think that's something like that.
And then she starts to cry.
She starts crying. I like thinking that she was thinking his her whole career, right? You're done. Right. You suck.
And I love the fact that she explains why she's freaking out. Everybody in her family is successful.
And musically successful.
Musically successful.
And she feels that she can't live up to it, and it's pressure.
Exactly.
And the same thing we find out that with Lewis, too.
Yeah.
Well, we don't find out that with Lewis to a certain extent. We
know
he's
to a certain extent. I mean, the football coach kind of gives a good background. He provides enough background for Lewis that we become invested in his character. So, like, the next two characters, we don't really become that invested as them as characters. This movie is kind of like paint by numbers.
It's paint by numbers, but the numbers sometimes are just out of sequence. So
you're saying it's very predictable as the direction of the movie?
Yeah. But like I said, I think it's a little inconsistent with the tutoring. I think you started off well with the first two characters, Gertrude and Lewis, but then you get to the third guy, and like I said, there's no payoff. Takes in the funeral, nothing happens. I think that's also when you take a movie and try to do it in a 30-year span.
It's tough. It is tough.
Yeah, it's real tough. And that's why it is paint by numbers and why there's so many cliches that are brought in here, because in my opinion, the movie wants to do too much. And I'll bring up another point here where things don't really connect, because I'll go into the next section. It says, so Mr. Holland and his wife end up having a son named Cole. The reason he's named Cole is because Mr. Holland loved John Coltrane. Well, we find out that Cole is deaf, and so Mr. Holland's severely disappointed that he'll never be able to share his love of music. Mr. Holland fails to learn American Sign Language properly, leaving him unable to communicate with his son and creating a rift and a divide between him and his son, and also between him and his wife, because she ends up having to raise Cole by herself. As the years progress, Mr. Holland grows closer to his students, Rowena, at Kennedy High, and more distant from his own wife and son. An argument with his teenage son finally makes Holland realize the error of his ways, and he learns to communicate with his son and help him visualize the music he can't hear, and repairs his relationship with his wife. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. One of the points that I wanted to make is, so we know he loves John Coltrane, and so he loves jazz music, but he also likes rock and roll. So basically, after every person who he's tutored, there's a jump and there's a montage scene of things that happened during that period of time, major events that have taken place. So like between Gertrude and Lewis, we see the firebombing of Vietnam and things like that. And this is troubling for me because John Lennon, you don't even understand how big of an influence he is on my life. And they use Imagine during the one montage scene. So the death of John Lennon is then used to connect Mr. Holland to his son.
I like that scene.
Okay, I like the scene too. Just think that it's done a little bit ham-handedly.
I think so.
I agree with Ted to a certain extent, and here's why. You should have had Mr. Holland, throughout the first third of the movie, show his appreciation for John Lennon. If we see him, get excited about something about John Lennon and say, oh, I'm a huge John Lennon fan, or something to that extent before John Lennon died, then it holds more weight when it devastates him in 1980, right?
Right.
So when Cole is basically giving his speech about, hey, you don't think I know who John Lennon is? It has more weight because he would have seen his father invested in John Lennon and then the Beatles.
Exactly.
And that's why I have a problem with this scene.
I like that they use the connection of A Beautiful Boy. That's one of John's most personal songs that he wrote to Sean. But ironically, Julian's the one that sings the song at the end. I like that they make that connection. I really do. And I like how they do that. I think that realization comes great. But it just seems like something happens in the world and then all of a sudden it affects Mr. Holland immediately. And we don't really know why. You couldn't have grown up in that era and the death of John Lennon not affected you in some way.
Oh, of course. Even our parents. I mean, even
that's what
anyone.
I'm referring
grandparents
to.
Maybe too.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
My parents did give a crap about John Lennon.
I mean,
they also didn't.
All right, everyone except Ken's parents.
There are people out there that didn't like the Beatles. Or
Oh yeah.
But they had a reaction to his death. I mean, I'm sure there was Klan members that were real happy that John Lennon was assassinated. Because you look at what happened. You look at what happened with the Beatles in the South.
I didn't think the Klan was going to make it into this.
They had to cancel a show in Tennessee because the Klan was going to firebomb where they were going to perform. So and that was all over the basis of John Lennon said the Beatles are bigger than Jesus, which was a quote that was taken out of context.
And he married Yoko Ono. So yeah,
well, that too. That quote was taken out of context, but it became a huge touch-off point for America. Okay, here's the reason why Beautiful Boy is going to be the connection between Cole and Mr. Holland. And it's like, okay, there's other ways they could have done that. That's just my personal opinion.
That's fine the way they did it. I just think they needed to ramp up to it. There's just show how much John Lennon meant to Mr. Holland, before you drop all this. And him singing Beautiful Boy, I don't have a big problem with it, but it's just like when he says beautiful Cole. At the end, I just cringe when he does that part. I mean,
yeah, because it's supposed to be Sean. I mean,
yeah,
right at the end, there's also a part of that song where he goes, Darling Sean, at the end, right? The original take. That's where I would rather sing Darling Cole or something like that. It just would sound a little bit better. Yeah. It's just, again, heavy-handed.
It's a nitpick. We can move on from John Lennon. I mean,
but what I love about that scene, though, because there's things I really like about that scene where, you know, you have the lights and the sign language and still mouthing out the words. Because at the beginning, he's half-heartedly learning how to sign language. He's half-heartedly invested into
his
Cole's
own
life
son
because he feels like Cole won't relate to his music. You know,
it's another cliche.
Well, we see when, you know, because like earlier on, even before he's born, when he's in the womb, he's playing music, you know, through, you know, his stomach, and he's looking forward to his son being maybe something that he's not. So when somebody has a dream about being famous for, let's just say, being a composer or something like that, he knows he's not going to be famous for being a composer now. So now he wants to add that to his son. You know, he wants to carry on that dream through the child.
Right.
And when that dream is dead,
in his opinion, it's dead.
Makes their relationship strained. And I think that's also
another cliche.
Yeah. And I think that's why when we get to Rowena.
Yeah,
that's where I wanted to go next.
And when it comes to Rowena, that's why he has one last gasp. His son can't live
That's
the life
one
that
way
he
to
wants.
look at this.
Well, I look at it as his chance to kind of grab something that he wants. I mean, people might look at it as a sexual thing and stuff
another
like
way
that.
to put it.
But that's the direction I was going. I'll be honest with you.
But I think he's looking at, hey, this is a me now to get out of this teaching, out of this, you know, situation, and to try to still reach my dreams.
Midlife crisis.
It's a midlife crisis. Mm-hmm. He's going through the midlife crisis.
I know, cliche. I get it.
You know, and he.
This whole thing is cliche.
It is cliche, but it actually works really well because of the fact that Richard Dreyfuss does a great job as somebody who's at a crossroad.
True.
And he has a weird situation here where he knows he either do what's right or do something that is crazy. And
is he even happy in his marriage at this point?
He sees, you know,
doesn't seem like it.
Doesn't it? Definitely, they're in different directions.
I don't think he doesn't hate his wife. He still loves his wife.
No.
But they're just not connecting right now because they're she's invested in Cole and he's invested in the school. They've taken two different routes and their lives don't revolve around each other as much. That's why they get into arguments all the time about Cole, is because he's not there for Cole. He doesn't show up for events for Cole, but he shows up for events at school because there's an expectation that Mr. Holland has to be at everything. Which is funny because they're trying to get rid of all these programs, but somehow Mr. Holland is at every little thing
gets added to everything.
Do.
I think this is the one time in this whole movie where Richard Dreyfuss's age makes things incredibly awkward.
You mean with Rowena?
Yes.
It is a daddy complex a little bit.
It is.
A little bit. Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
This is where you needed a younger teacher. This would have made more sense. Gertrude's character. And Mr. Holland fell in love with Gertrude. By the time he, has this infatuation with Rowena, it's kind of creepy. It's not that it doesn't happen, because it does.
All the time.
My ex-wife's school district. It happened with the music teacher.
So the trend is with music teachers.
The music teacher got caught. The music teacher got caught in the band room with a student who was in love with him.
Let's look at what's going on with Rowena. Okay, it sounds like her parents want to have her join the family business, or
yes,
do what they want her to do.
Another cliche,
and it's another cliche. But let's be honest with you: the things that he says to her are things that she wants to hear. And I think in any of those type of situations where a student falls in love with a teacher, it's because the teacher sees something in them that others haven't. Especially
Right.
people that should, like her parents, right? And
Correct.
So when he goes up to her and talks about her singing and asks her what she thinks this character is going through, and she's like, I don't know. And she's like, it's your job to know. And I think that's so important. I think that's why I like Richard Dreyfuss's performances here, because he comes off as being somebody who really does care. And, I think with Gertrude at the beginning, he finds out what makes Gertrude tick, right? She gives all like I said earlier, she gives all the reasons why, she thinks she's a failure. And
Right.
now we get the same thing with Rowena, why she needs to go to New York, because she feels like she does have talent, but there are other people there that want to say, okay, yeah, you're talented, but you know what? Play it safe, and you need to stay here with us.
Validates her talent.
Right, validates her talent and tells her she could be anything she wants to be, and she falls in love in what he sees in her. She falls in love with him for what he sees in her. And
the only problem with that is that she takes it to heart. Like, you can be a professional musician, but she's like, well, I'm going to do it now. And I'm going to ditch high school, which was definitely not his intent or his plan. The thing that was a little, I don't want to say creepy, but is that she's like, hey, I'm going to New York. You need to come with me. Just screw your family. You need to leave your family and come with me to New York, and we could be a duo. We could be a team. Whether it's sexual or not, I don't know, but I think she wants him as a mentor. But the fact that she really had no respect for his life, and that she was looking at what she could get out of it to make her dream come true, it's a little selfish on her part. But then he's looking at it as, well, maybe I could be that composer,
Right.
Go to New York. It could be my dream. I can't have it with my family. I can't have it with my son, but maybe I can have it with this girl. And that's where it was kind of going in that little
I think
sexual, creepy direction.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think he looks at her as sexual. I think he looks
doesn't.
at her.
He never does.
No,
he never
looks
does.
at her almost as replacing Cole.
A daughter.
Yeah. As a daughter, where he could live his life through her. He could be like her muse. Because he basically
sees it the other way, is that daddy-daughter complex. I don't think Holland ever sees her in a sexual effect.
Well, they try to give it a sense where they're about ready to kiss, but then kiss her on the cheek instead. But
exactly,
when a younger woman finds you attractive, of course, there's that little temptation probably in you that goes, I wouldn't know that I was 30 years ago, right? And say, we all want to be wanted to a certain extent, and I think that's where I think Dreyfuss does a great job of a balancing act. He loves his wife, doesn't want to hurt his wife. I love it the scene earlier where Dreyfuss is at home and he blurts out her name. And
Rowena. Yeah,
and his wife is like, "Who's that?" And then he comes up with the fake excuse because he's been caught. I like that. I think that's realism, and I think that is not cliche. Out of all the things in this movie, that one part actually works extremely well. And then later on, she sees the name in the bill,
which does not help.
She's 17, and I like the section where he tries to he has to tiptoe and do the hop step around. All of a sudden, it's a Norse mythology. I got a book around here somewhere about it. We get no payoff once his wife finds out who Rowena really. It's all of a sudden it's just dropped and gone. The part that's creepy is that she's 17.
Oh, she's not 18. Did she say something?
I mean, if you want to make she's a senior, so she's either 17 or 18.
Right.
By this point, there's a big age difference.
Yeah, it's creepy.
I mean, he's in his mid to late 50s at this point.
But he does nothing wrong, so I don't know how creepy you think this is. Is it creepy that on her part?
There's a point where
not doing anything to make it creepy.
See, okay, because I listened and I heard everything that you said about how that straddles this line where he doesn't necessarily look at her sexual, but she looks at him as something, the daddy complex type
Daddy
of
daughter.
thing. The director and the screenwriter, I think this lands more on the screenwriter. He doesn't pick a lane and stick with it. Because I think the moment he hears her start to sing, I think he's very smitten with her.
Oh, yeah, he's infatuated with her, but is he infatuated with her talent or the way she looks? I think he's infatuated with her talent.
I think both. He's not happy at home. His wife and him are always fighting. And so his home life is not any good. And we see that consistently because he's having difficulty communicating and connecting with his son. It's interesting because he brings up Beethoven. He knows that there's a way that a deaf person can experience music, but we don't find that out until he actually connects through Beautiful Boy.
Quick question, because I want to go back to what you just said. Pick a lane. What lane are we talking about here? Because I think it's too complex to just pick a lane.
It's either he likes her because he wants her, he sees everything in her that he couldn't be, or that he wants for his son, or they're in an unrequited love. And I think straddling that line, it ends up kind of like this weird casserole of weird.
It should be awkward. It's an awkward situation. I think it needs to be all those things that you just said. I think when it comes to matters of the heart or brain and everything, there's a mixed emotions about everything. When somebody, let's just say, considers cheating maybe on somebody else, I'm sure it's just not cut and dry. I'm sure there's a lot of different things that go into their mind. Should I do this? Should I do that? I actually think that Dreyfuss does a great job of struggling with all that.
I didn't say Dreyfuss didn't do a good job. I say the screenwriter didn't do a good job. It would make a lot more sense. If we're going to go the thing where he's going to cheat, it would make a hell of a lot more sense that he would fall in love with the drama teacher. And the drama teacher and him have this thing. And that's why they're doing this.
Why would that make more sense?
That's why they're doing this Gershwin review together. The way that everything is connected, and this could be an editing problem as well. The way things are connected on here, and we're connecting the dots. In my opinion, this is my personal opinion, it comes off awkward, sometimes creepy, and it just is like, I'm ready for this section to be over. It is weird.
No,
it feels weird.
I disagree with you, Ted. It's like counterpoint. I disagree with you. I think the scene is needed, and I think it is done well because it is a realistic scene. You could say it's cliche. Student falls in love with teacher. Teacher falls in love with student. I think it's played well. It sets his values. It sets his priorities in line of what he feels, what he values. His family, his desires, his career, his loves. Okay. Is he a little smitten with her? Maybe. Is she smitten with him? Incredibly. And I was talking with Ken earlier, the fact that Rowena says, hey, you need to come to New York with me. And she didn't say this flat out, but you need to come to New York with me. Abandon your family. Screw them. You come with me. We're going to be a team. We're going to do everything. We're going to be the best. We're going to be famous. We're going to live out all of our dreams. Maybe he thought about it for a millisecond. But you could tell, ultimately, when he meets her at the bus stop, there is no way he's going to act on it. He's not going to move on it.
But when does he figure that out? Because if you think about it, he's at the play, and he's with his wife and his son, and they said, I have to go to this after party. He hasn't chosen exactly what to do yet.
I think he has, because he gives her the phone number of the band guy that he was in the band with.
No, I get that. But even before that, though, that's what he was probably doing in between that. But he was too excited. He was
really excited. Yes,
he was. A guy that might be ready to jump ship. So maybe there needed to be a little bit more time in between that. But I think he didn't, as soon as he left his wife and son, I think he thought to himself, what the hell am I doing? And he called his friend up, told him about this girl, and gave him the number and sent her on her merry way because he didn't want to think any more about this. Because it was tempting him. He wanted to be...
It is flattering, right? It's
It is
flattering.
flattering. I don't think it would have the same effect if it was him and the drama teacher, because he's still stuck in that school. It wouldn't elevate him to being, this great composer that he's always dreamt about. This gives him a fresh start to try to be something that he's always dreamt to be. Being with the drama teacher would not do any of that. It would just be cheating on my wife, because I'm in love with the drama teacher thing.
Yeah, I mean, you both make very good points.
Because we're right.
I think ultimately what I'm trying to get at here, too, and I think this is my biggest criticism of the movie in general, is it tries to jam 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag. And it already comes out at 142 minutes. It's a lot.
That's what you get when you have 3 decades worth of material.
That's true.
They try to cram. They try to cram as much into this movie as they possibly can.
And they didn't cram enough either.
Right. Whereas if they would have focused a little bit closer on a couple of things and cut other things out, I think that the movie probably works a little bit better.
This falls into my Love Actually problem that I have. So the movie Love Actually has all these different storylines, right?
Right.
And we went through each one of those storylines, and we said what ones should have made the cut, which ones should have made the cut.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this one suffers from, like you said, doing too much, but not doing enough. So what they should have done was focus on one relationship, maybe 3 different decades, and that's it. Focus on the 60s, the 70s, maybe even 4. British here, relationship there, boom, boom, boom. They introduce us into relationships that don't seem to matter much.
Right.
All flat. Like I said, there's no payoff on some of this. We see Gertrude at the end. The other kid gets killed in Vietnam, but what about all the other kids? What happens to Rowena? We don't find out whatever happens. It would have been nice to find out. I would have loved to have seen it if we would have found out if she became a star. And that even drove him even into more depression when he lost his job.
Did she get the starring role in Les Mis on Broadway?
Right.
Something to the extent
or did she star in Cats on Broadway?
Where and then he thinks about the decisions he's made at the end and the choices that he made, which then would make the ending even a bigger finale. Here, let me go ahead and wrap us up at the end here, okay?
Yay!
All right, so in 1995, Walter, who is now the principal, shuts down the school's art programs, citing further cuts from the education board and the need to prioritize reading, writing, and math. And Holland is laid off as a result. Holland makes an impassioned plea to the board to no avail and becomes despondent, believing that his teaching career has amounted to nothing. On his last day, Holland's wife and son, now a teacher himself, by the way, help him clear out his office, and they quietly leave the otherwise empty school. But passing the auditorium, Holland finds that it's packed full of current and former students who greet him with a standing ovation. Gertrude, who was the struggling clarinetist at the beginning of the movie, is now governor of Oregon, and she gives a speech praising Mr. Holland, that his legacy is more than just the symphony. It is all the people that he's helped and influenced, all the lives he has touched over 30 years. She joins past members of the school's orchestra that have been practicing the symphony in secret. I kind of want to know how they did that. And then Mr. Holland conducts them in the premiere performance of his symphony. So this is probably my favorite part of the whole movie right here. This ending here, I think, is full of emotions. I love the fact that, when he walks in and sees everybody that's here for him, it does bring a tear to my eye. Dreyfuss does a great job of how he responds to it, trying to hold back the emotion. He's trying to hold back tears. He's excited to see these, different people that he haven't seen in decades. Dreyfuss pulls the heartstrings on this and makes me like this movie at the end of the day. If we don't have this ending the way that this ends, I don't know if I like this movie. I think this ending is perfect. I even like how it ends right at the end where the band stops playing and it fades to black.
I like that.
I love the fact that it doesn't have to do anything else. That it ends just like that. And I think it's a great ending to a mediocre film.
I like the end as well. You have to admit, it's very, very schmaltzy. This is all fluff.
Good fluff.
It's good fluff. You brought up a major point and a major criticism. How did all of these people know how to do the
parts and everything,
his opus together?
Especially if you have a governor of Oregon. When does she have time? And she couldn't even show up on time.
And she's always late in everything. I don't think they needed the opus at the end. I think her speech was perfect. I think that at the whole ending of the movie, I think her speech wraps up the movie perfectly. The students are your opus, Mr. Holland. I think that's the biggest thing that we take away from the end of the movie. Because I think that that's what you've been leading up to this entire movie. That this is your opus. And look at your son. Look at how successful he is. He's insanely successful. He's been offered a job at the most prestigious school for the deaf in America. That's where I personally would have ended it. I mean, we've seen him futzing around with being a composer and everything like that. I don't think we needed it. I think an honorarium of that particular teacher, because I've been to one of those where they've honored a teacher that I was particularly close with, who's since passed away, and I miss him tremendously. He impacted my life. To me personally, her speech would have been the perfect way to end it. And for him to realize that while I may not have been a great composer,
he made a difference.
I may not have been a massive musician. I've made a difference, and make that connection where the students really are your symphony. Your teaching has been immensely impactful. That's just my opinion.
I disagree with it. I think the symphony is needed. I think it's perfectly done. You have to disregard the fact that how did the governor get time to practice, or any of these kids get to practice. But I think the symphony and how his emotions on his face, I think that's what makes it work, is Dreyfuss's facial response to this while they're playing his song. Even at the end where he ends it on the last note, the full emotion on his face is great. It's the perfect ending, seeing how he has reacted to all of this. And the to some extent, I want to see the composer that he wanted to always be. And now I get to see it. I get to see what his vision was. And the gift from the students was to show us that vision of what he wanted to be. I like it. I don't, if it ended up with just her speech, I don't think it would be enough. It would be, is it a good thing, her speech? Yeah, I love the speech. But I don't think it gives that really strong emotional ending that this orchestra does.
I'm leaning with Ted. I think it should have ended in the black without the orchestra playing, but I understand the name of the movie is obviously Mr. Holland's Opus, but his opus could have been his teaching career too. I thought it was a little schmaltzy as well with the band playing. I don't know. I thought it was a little cheesy the way the movie ended. I would have liked the speech, by the governor of Oregon and all these people that he's impacted his life on. Just as he's walking down the aisle, all the faces, all the names, all these people that have come from all over the country, maybe even all over the world, to say goodbye, to salute him, to thank him. And then the opus, come on, the governor of Oregon? I mean, that's pretty high up on the food chain there. I think that would have been a great way to end the movie. But I can see your point, Ken, but
maybe not being his opus. Maybe they give him a gift as something unique or a gift outside of just the speech itself.
Like a gold watch?
But no, something from the heart. Because I think the students giving back to him is very important in this end of this movie.
I agree.
He's given so much of his time and effort. What do they get back besides saying thank you? I think that's why we have the sympathy here is because the students want to give something back. And how are you going to do that? Well, you do it through music. What has he been working on throughout the whole thing? Well, it's, this piece here. It's funny that it's finished. At the same time, Dreyfuss sells it. And Dreyfuss sells this whole movie. He deserves the Academy Award nomination. I'm not saying he needed to win here, but the award nomination
criticism isn't with Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss elevates the situation. The students playing the symphony that he's written essentially says the same thing that I've been saying, just in a different way, that his symphony is the students.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from. I just think it needs to go on a high note, and how you're going to accomplish that. And I don't think the high note could be the speech. If a speech has to be given, it should have been the wife then. Because the wife is the one that had to go through all this with him throughout the whole time. I think the name is Glenn Headley. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her first name correctly. She passed away, unfortunately, 7 years ago. She died really young. She was only 62 at the time. And I like her as an actress. I've seen her in many things. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels comes to mind.
Right.
Sergeant Bilko, which I know you're probably not a big fan of, but I like it. And I like her because I think she has comedic chops. But her character throughout this movie, we haven't talked about her at all. I think she's an excellent character and maybe written very well. I like how she supports him at the beginning of his movie.
She gets forgotten about a lot, though, by the writer.
At times, I think so, but it is Mr. Holland that we're focusing on, and Mr. Holland does go through a point where, the students are more important than her. But I do like how she goes through, at the beginning, she's supportive of this music career, and that teaching is just there to help support. But then when a child comes along, everything changes. The way she supports him changes, because now, what's the most important thing? Well, it's Cole. And his music career has to take a way back seat. I think she's the glue to that keeps the family together. She's there to raise Cole. She's a strong character. She stands up against her husband when required, but then she's also an understanding and sympathetic character as well. I mean, I'm not thrilled with the fact that we didn't get any repercussions from his little thing with the student. Granted, it wasn't much of a thing. But when she found out, I mean, she didn't question it. When he came home, he basically just said, I love you. And she was like, I know. She sees through things. She sees situations. And I just like her as an actress. I think she did a very good job. And I think if you're going to finish the movie with the speech, she should have been the one giving it.
I can see your point there. I mean, I like her as an actress as well. I think she does a really good job here. Except when they sell her out, when she doesn't confront him about his dalliance with the student. It's just,
But didn't he do anything wrong?
Seemed like he wanted to.
I don't know.
Seeming to and doing it are two different things. How can she roast him over the coals for something he didn't do? I think that's why I like Mr. Holland's character and why I like this movie is because he represents things that I think a normal person goes through a 30-year span. We look at our jobs. I didn't see myself doing the job that I've been doing all these years. I had dreams of being something else. And if something came up right now that made me try one more time to be successful in that area that I wanted to be in, I would be tempted to take it.
You always wanted to be a podcaster, Ken, so there's that.
But I wanted to be a good podcaster, so there's that.
Well, unfortunately, that probably would never happen.
Well, you're batting 500.
Well, thank you for your support. I really appreciate that.
You're batting 500. Come on.
Looking back now, I wish I would have gotten to the movie business. That I would have went to film school and maybe tried my hand at directing. Maybe I would never.
You could have been the next Kevin Smith.
Maybe so. That means I would have to go to school and then drop out and then pretend that I knew everything and that I didn't need to be taught. And I would surround me with people that also would support that. So
I wanted to be the next Quentin Tarantino. So there's that.
Yeah,
I want to be a
would want it
cowboy.
to be. I would probably want it to be the next.
Your idol?
No, the director.
Frank
Frank
Capra.
Capra.
Frank Capra? Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm surprised Frank Capra didn't have his hands in this, being that it's a Touchstone movie, and he was big in the Touchstone movies.
you know what though? I think there are
Frank Capra. Frank
I was
Capra.
going to say,
III.
Capra's dead by then, wasn't he?
Yeah, no fun.
But Frank Capra, though, I think it kind of influences these type of movies. This is a very Frank Capra-like movie. It's interesting that it did get nominated for Best Screenplay at the Golden Globes. Based on what we've been saying about the writing here, you wouldn't think that was the case.
Golden Globes, I'm not totally surprised.
I don't think the rating is as bad as we've been beating it up on. There could have been more, but it's challenging again, as I said. You're trying to do a movie about a 30-year span. I'll use Ted's thing about picking a lane. Decide what you want to do and just go with it. I just feel like there's multiple stories here that was thought of and then abandoned, but left in the movie. And if you're not going to have a start and finish to a particular storyline, don't put it in the movie.
Yeah.
So this movie, of course, is about music. There's a soundtrack to this.
There is a soundtrack. Yes.
Do you guys have any opinions about this soundtrack?
It's one of my favorite soundtracks.
It is a great soundtrack. There is nothing negative about this soundtrack at all.
All of the musical choices are brilliant.
Yeah.
As far as we go back to John Lennon, now in present day, Yoko's not as protective of his catalog as she used to be. And I was surprised back in the 90s when this movie came out that they were able to get the use of Imagine. That was one thing, that was one song that you never really heard in movies.
That's true, because of the licensing rights.
Exactly. But I absolutely adore this. I think every song that's chosen here, from the Toys all the way through the song that's sung through the credits by Julian Lennon, and then the song that's sung by the members of the not Backstreet Boys, Boys to Men, which is another one of my favorite groups from the 90s. Immensely talented individuals. It all works for me. I like the use of Jackson Browne. I thought that was really good. The Pretender. Mm-hmm. I think that fits really well with his character. Yeah, I love this soundtrack.
Yeah, it was interesting to see that, Julian Lennon. So you have Richard Dreyfuss singing "Beautiful Boy," and then now you got Julian Lennon singing the theme to Cole. And I think that's very interesting how they were able to put that together. He was very successful in the 80s with his own music, but by the 90s, he's kind of a forgotten entity. So bringing him into this, I think, is a good thing.
It's a bold move.
And actually, I think Julian Lennon is actually an underrated performer. I mean, when you live in the shadow of John Lennon, of course.
You think he would have had a lot more being in the shadow of John Lennon.
His first album was really, really...
It was successful.
It was really successful. But it was really good, too. I mean, the lyrics and the fact that he's just a splitting image of his father when it comes to sound. And
in 5 years past his death.
He ripped his face off.
Yeah.
We got money for that, Dad.
Glasses and everything.
Yeah, exactly. Julian actually could have played, I know this is a different movie, but at the end of the movie yesterday, I think that Julian should have probably been the one to play John, but that's just my opinion.
Maybe he didn't want to at that particular time. The only problem I have with the soundtrack, there's no Coltrane in this.
Maybe they couldn't get the rights.
Don't name the child with Cole. Try to find something that you can actually get the rights to for the music.
That's a thought that I have every time that I listen to the soundtrack and I watch the movie, is why they didn't get any John Coltrane songs.
In fact, when you have Cole sitting there, and we didn't mention this because this is one of my favorite scenes, is when Cole, after everything that's happened with his dad playing Beautiful Boy, he goes and starts grabbing records and starts listening to everything. And the smile on his face, the look on his face when he's listening to one of the records, that's golden. I love that. I love the fact that he gets invested in something that his dad is into. One of my favorite actors is Jimmy Stewart, and that's because of my dad. one of my favorite musical artists is Buddy Holly. That's because of my dad. There are certain things that my dad has been interested throughout my life that I've become interested as well. Pepperoni.
Maybe Cole should have been named Lennon.
Then that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
And everything would have, when he would have died, that would have made more sense. And we didn't say much, but I think the child actors and the adult actors that played Cole did a good job as well, especially teenage Cole. I just liked how this character was. Most of the acting here is really good, and I think it really helps about the movie.
I agree. It does.
The acting here is superb. I agree with all of it.
All right, should we go to our reviews?
Let's do it.
Okay, so my review that I took was from Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times. The blurb that I took from him is, "Year follows year, and it's one of the pleasures of Mr. Holland's opus. Like Forrest Gump, the characters live through many of the watershed events of 3 decades. The assassination of Kennedy, the war in Vietnam, the plague of drugs and school violence, and the cost-cutting measures that eventually eliminate programs like Mr. Holland's music class. And the day that American high schools admit that electives like music, art, and drama are as important as sports will be the day that they value culture as much as entertainment for the alums." I agree. I think that this is like Forrest Gump for teachers. I like Forrest Gump. I like this movie. I really do. I think it could have been written better. I think that the fact that it was nominated for a Golden Globe, I mean, we can criticize the Golden Globes as for whatever it is, but it's still a relatively prestigious award. And to be nominated, I don't know. That's a little far-fetched for me. I would have liked to have seen a more concise and more direct screenplay. This movie for me, because I adore the soundtrack and the fact that it celebrates John Lennon, this movie is a 3.5 stars for me. It's above average. It's not quite the 4-star level for me. It brings up a lot of the feels. We'll put it that way. I mean, the whole person dying in Vietnam and blah, blah, blah. It's a cliche movie that works, in my opinion. That's hard to do. 3.5 hooks for me.
Cool. I'll give you my review. So my movie reviewer is Michael DeQuina from themoviereport.com. Michael says, "Who knew the director of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, a very underrated movie, I might add, was capable of making a profoundly moving drama?" Yeah, I would agree. And yes, that's sarcasm on Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. From that director, you would not expect this type of a movie. The movie has flaws. The movie has some issues. It's a fun watch, from kind of start to maybe about 80% in. My problem is that towards the end of the movie, I really kind of just veered off. I wasn't really concerned with how it ended. I wasn't emphatically involved in it at that point. The acting is great. Richard Dreyfuss is great. The cast does a great job. But I just think by the end, I just wasn't involved in it. And it just didn't do it for me. We debated the ending on this one, whether, the opus was the kids or the opus was the symphony and how it ended. But for me, I'm glad I watched it. Am I going to watch it again? Probably not. Is it my favorite Richard Dreyfuss movie? Not even close. So for me, this is an average watch. I'm giving it 3 hooks. It's a solid movie, but I'd move on. How about you, Ken? Take us home.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Malcolm Johnson of the Hartford Courant. He says, though Patrick Duncan's screenplay goes in various directions and never develops a cohesive narrative, Herrick keeps the story rolling along. I agree. It's not cohesive. There's some things that are just left undone. There's things that they start off with and just let it be. Pun intended there. But
Beatles reference.
Beatles reference. Music reference. The movie itself has its strong points and its low points. The acting, of course, is the strong point here. Dreyfuss is very, very good here. One of his best performing roles. I won't say it's his best role, but it's one of his best performing roles. There's a lot of emotion that he has to show during this movie, whether it's when he gets frustrated or he's just emotional from seeing all these kids honor him at the end of the movie. Dreyfuss wears his acting on his face. I think when your actor can act without talking, I think that's what separates the good and great actors from just average actors. And Richard Dreyfuss is above to a great actor. Yeah, and this role definitely shows that. I think the ending saves this movie for me. I will say I don't think the actual composition of the music is great by any means, but the emotion, like I said, that Dreyfuss portrays when conducting this, it's just a nice way to end. And I love the fade to black. I just wish that they would have just eliminated a couple of odd things throughout the movie that they started with but never finished with it, and maybe took those time frames to add on a little bit more to other storylines. Going into this, I thought about giving it a 4 hooks, but I don't feel like it's a 3.5 either. So I'm going to, do an audible here and go in the middle. 3.75 hooks.
3.75.
3.75. 3 and I guess 3/4 of hooks. It had the potential to be so much more. This had the guts of being something that could have been nominated for an Academy Award, but it just missed the boat.
You mean for Best Movie?
Yeah, for Best Movie. Yeah, it has all the elements there to make it one of those contenders. They just didn't sit down on things that were extremely important and develop them a little bit better. If they would have took some, like 3 or 4 stories into that movie and just concentrated on those and gave them a little bit more depth and, give us a little bit more about Mr. Holland before this all started, I think you have an Academy Award nominee movie.
I agree. The screenwriter hopped on the cliche bus and never got off.
It's okay to do cliches. Most movies that are nominated for Academy Awards have cliches in them. Or a lot of the movies that have cliches in them invented that cliche. So,
yes, exactly. Which is why a movie like Parasite, which is so different from anything else, truly was amazing. All stories have been told. I mean, stories have been around since the Greeks, from Grecian times. So it's how you do it.
What this film wanted to be, but didn't become, was Forrest Gump. This movie
exactly. That's why I brought up Forrest Gump.
This wanted to be Forrest Gump, and it didn't. It had the soundtrack. It had the actors.
Exactly.
All it missed was Tom Hanks saying to Lyndon Johnson, "I was hot in the buttocks."
That's all. Yeah.
But Forrest Gump is a great example, like you said, of cliches. Forrest Gump now has become a cliche movie. And
yes.
Mr. Holland's Opus had that opportunity, but he just missed the boat.
Forrest Gump still shouldn't have won Best Picture that year, but that's a whole nother conversation.
What should have won?
It's still a good movie, though.
I believe, wasn't that Pulp Fiction's year?
I like Forrest Gump. So
I like Forrest Gump, too. It's not Pulp Fiction, though.
Pulp Fiction, though, is not for everybody either.
I like no Pulp Fiction, personally.
Probably no Pulp in my fiction.
Yeah, I like no Pulp in my fiction either. All right. Well, that's our reviews of Mr. Holland's Opus. Ted, tell us where they can find us on the World Wide Web.
We can be found on Twitter at hookedon_movies. Come on over and tell us what you think of Mr. Holland's Opus. Did it hop on the cliche bus and ride it all the way to the end, or was it original? You let us know. And, of course, whatever podcast version you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, wherever you find us, if you can, leave us a 5-star rating and also write us a review. If you write a review, just, tell us what you think of Mr. Holland's Opus.
Cool. Ken, what's the next movie we're going to be doing in our series here?
So we're going to actually tackle the Beverly Hills Cop series. So we're going to do 1 through 4. Beverly Hills Cop 4 just recently came out on Netflix, so we decided that we wanted to revisit this series, especially considering Beverly Hills Cop now is 40 years old. How about that?
40 years old. Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
Jesus, we're old.
We're old.
And don't forget to check us out on our Facebook page, Hooked on Movies, where you can see trailers of these movies and some other things in the entertainment world, especially related to movies.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. And as always, Ken, Ted, you complete me.
Oh,
Well, thank you. See you at the movies.
see you next time on Hooked on Movies.